What's going on, guys? It's the Saucy Sock here with another video, and in this one we're going to break down more the defensive side of the ball. I've already released a couple videos kind of focusing on offense with passing especially, but now we're going to move on to the defensive side of the ball because I honestly think in college football 25, defense is probably more important than offense. And for those of y'all who have played this game for any amount of time at all, y'all know that defense can be incredibly difficult if you don't know what you're doing. So this is good for beginner level players and advanced level players. It's always good to just get a refresher on these things if you've been playing this game for a while. And we're going to set up our defense, and I'm going to try to teach you how to run a defense like some of the best players in the world do. Now, first things first, before you even get to anything within the defensive formation or the game, you always want to set up your depth chart, and this is how you're going to set it up. So on the defensive side of the ball, speed is going to be your best friend. I typically like to always look at my cornerbacks first. I feel like cornerbacks are probably the most important position on the defensive side of the ball, as well as defensive end pass rushers. But right here, I'm looking at my cornerbacks, and speed is primarily what I'm looking for here. So I'll likely run something like this just so I can get some fast guys on the field. Now, another thing you can do, although I don't really have the team to do it with, it's not always a bad idea to put a wide receiver at cornerback. Yes, their man coverage and zone coverage stats are going to be awful. But if you're running straight man coverage and you're playing against a 99 speed receiver like Nick Harbor, for example, it's not always a bad idea to put a fast receiver covering him just to make sure you don't get bombed over the top deep. Because with a 99 speed receiver with platinum takeoff, 94 speed cornerback's not going to keep up very well with them, right? So just keep that in mind. It's up to you. You don't have to do that. Now, next thing I'm probably looking at doing too is I'm going to go to my rush, the RLE and RRE. This stands for rush left end and rush right end, defensive end. And you always want to put some quick jumps here. So as you can see right here, Tyreek Sapp has bronze quick jump, which is not great, but it's better than no quick jump at all. And then I would probably look around to see if anyone else has a quick jump. If I have one, great. Now this is kind of up to you too. This guy only is a 71 overall. It's kind of up to you whether or not you want a second quick jump that bad or not. If not, it's perfectly okay, but you always at least want to try to get one guy with quick jump. It just makes blitzes come in a lot better. But you could also still run a really good defense without quick jump. Now, as far as safeties go, again, kind of the same thing applies. Like the cornerbacks, you kind of want to put the fast guys back here unless you just have an absolute dog at safety like a Keon Sabb from Alabama. Although he might only be 89 speed, he's still a really good coverage guy and he's going to get you a lot of interceptions. So that's kind of the basics of how to set up a depth chart, is really just looking at speed and quick jumps. Now moving on to the formations. Actually, first, before we do that, let's actually talk about the coaching adjustments. These are definitely going to be personal preference. Now I will say auto flip, I always leave on, or I always leave off actually, but I've been keeping it on lately. I realize with auto flip off, you can get blitzes to come in better, but it's not that much of a difference. Like this really doesn't matter. I say for sakes of this, you can leave it on. Option defense, I always put both option defensive options on conservative. You want to force the quarterback to pitch the ball. That's how you're going to be able to force some turnovers. Sometimes you could force a bad pitch where the ball goes over the running back's head, and you can make a play on that. You always want your CPUs to play the quarterback, and then you play the running back with your user. Strip ball tackling, you can leave that on balance. I wouldn't worry about that, as well as I also wouldn't touch quarterback matchups or defensive motion response. You could try it out. I never do it. Now, the bread and butter, obviously, that everyone looks for is zone drops. Now, there is no secret number to the best zone drops you can run. These are going to change throughout the course of the game. Now, for me, I personally start off with flats on 10, and I leave everything else on default. And based on what my opponent runs, this is where it'll change. And we'll get more into that as we go on with the video. Next thing, I always recommend that you try to get safeties in at the linebacker position because you don't take much of a hit as you would think from runs. Now, obviously, it's always better to have linebackers. They have better block shedding. But if you're usering really, really well and you have a safety that's quick, you could actually make and stop a lot of these runs just by your user alone. So it's not always a bad idea to put safeties in at linebacker unless you just have an absolutely dog of a linebacker that you just can't take off the field. Now, next piece of advice I would give, try to stay in one defensive formation. You know, this isn't real life football. This is video game football. You can stop goal line runs out of dime, or you could stop empty out of 3-4. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it doesn't really matter what defensive set you run in video game football. It's how you set it up. Now, obviously, in real life, you're never going to come out with 6 DBs and a dime set against a goal line run or a heavy wing T set. But in video game football, you can kind of away with it. I like to run this nickel 3-3 stack. There's plenty of good defensive formations you could scheme out of. This is just my personal favorite here because it's very versatile and what you could do with the linebackers slash safeties. So I would always recommend staying in one defensive formation. It just helps you simplify things. It helps you know like what personnel you have on the field at all times. You always know how they're going to align, and you can just master and make adjustments to that one defensive formation and scheme up your own defense to make it unique and run it the best way that it fits you. So moving on, I like to run the 3-3 stack with safeties and a linebacker. And as you look at the bottom here where it says shell, now this is where you can disguise your defensive coverage. So for example, if I wanted to call this cover 3 drop right here, if I use this right stick and I move it to the right, I can go all the way to a cover 2 and shell my cover 3 into a cover 2. That way, I'll call a play here so you guys can see. Boom. Now typically cover 3 has a 1 high safety look, but right here it looks like a cover 2. This is probably one of the most important things that I am starting to learn after playing this game for a while. Is shelling your defense is very, very important. You never want to telegraph what you're doing a lot of times pre-snap. You don't want your opponent to ever line up before the ball is snapped and know exactly what coverage you're in because good players are going to take advantage of that. You always want to, football is a thinking man's game. You always want to have your opponent guessing, and as long as you can make them just guess a little bit, that could be enough to force a bad throw and a turnover. So I'm running cover 3 here. And as you can see, I'm in cover 2. Now, keep in mind, another thing when you shell defenses is that guys are going to be in that shell, meaning that typically in a regular cover 3, this is how it would look, right? You would have 1 high safety, flat defender would be down here, and you wouldn't have that 2 high safety look. So it's always important to keep in mind where your guys are lined up. Make sure you check your play art before the play is run so you know where or who is playing where. Now, what are some things that I like to do personally with my defense? Well, I use the shell, and it's always important to kind of, if you run a cover 0 shell like I've been doing lately, make sure you have your safeties that are pretty quick in the game. That way, so you don't get bombed over the top, and here's why. So I like to do something where I would call maybe like a cover 0 shell and call, let's say, cover 2 drop. Now, and we'll call a random play on offense. Let's go off of spread, halfback weak. And let's run something like PA read here. So I called cover 2, but as you can see, safeties are walked up a little bit, and every receiver has a man in front of them. This kind of looks like a man coverage look. Now, that's what your opponent's going to think, and they might try to mess with their route combinations a little bit to try to beat man coverage, but little do they know, you're in zone. So keep in mind, again, you always want to keep aware of where your guys are lined up. Again, this isn't your typical cover 2. Your safeties are walked up. Obviously, you're very vulnerable to getting beat deep here. Now, let me give an example of something that I like to run on defense, primarily out of cover 2. Now, it's all going to depend on what the opponent's running, but I like to kind of run more of like a Tampa 3 look, where I drop one of my hook curls into a middle third here. That way, I can take away that middle of the field and not have to worry about post routes beating me. Now, you always want to drop this guy back a little bit because if you call a middle third and he's played up like this, he's not going to play way back here very well. It's always important to kind of drop him back a little bit if you were to run this type of shell. Now, from here, I always like to pinch my defensive line. I press left on the D-pad and down on the left stick to pinch. Also, if you want to, I meant to tell y'all how to change this guy to a middle third. If you click on this guy and press A, you can see all of his assignments. You can put him in all different types of coverage. And as you can see, middle third is up on the left stick. So to do that, A, up on the left stick, middle third. Now, once you get better at that, I always recommend that you use your quick adjustments, which this guy is a linebacker. So what I'm going to do is to change a linebacker. I could use any one of these guys here. But if I double tap left on the left stick, or right on the D-pad, I can now pull up all my linebackers and they all have icons over their head. So from here, when this screen pops up, you can click on an icon, let's say Y, and I can put them on a middle third while using Turner right here, the other linebacker. So it's always important to try to use your quick adjustments too. You don't want to be caught on someone making an adjustment and then snap the ball. I'd recommend practicing this in practice mode, your quick adjustment. So again, for linebackers, it's right, double tap right on the D-pad twice, and you can now put whatever linebacker in whatever coverage you want. Now, what's a couple other things that I look for? Well, out of a shotgun set, I like to user my linebacker that's in front of the running back here. That way, if they run the ball, you can usually do a pretty good job with looping here and coming free and make a tackle with your user. Now, right here, you could also move your safeties out. And this is kind of the defense I like to sit in. It's not a bad defense at all. And there is very little that they can attack here. Maybe a corner route, but that's where the zone drops will come in handy. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and call a play, and we're just going to see how it looks. So notice how I played that. I wasn't just using one player. I was doing a thing called switch sticking. Now, switch sticking is where you could use any guy in a coverage assignment, and when the ball is snapped, I'll show y'all. Watch this. I can move around. I could click the right stick and flick it in a direction of a defender I want to use, and basically switch to any defender in coverage that I want to take away routes, right? Now, keep in mind with switch stick, you can't switch stick when the ball is in the air, and you can only switch stick if your user is in a coverage assignment, and you can only switch stick to other defenders in a coverage assignment. So I'll just show an example here. Watch what happens. Watch. I'm going to start off with Turner here. Watch where I end up. So here, boom, I'm using this guy. Boom, I'm switching to Bridges up here. And I'm just flicking my right stick in the direction of where these players are at. Now, it's always important. Now, of course, you could sit here and do this, something like this. And, you could just user one guy. This isn't bad. There's people that can play good defense by just using one guy, right? But switch sticking is just a good ability to use if you want to take away other routes. If you see a route coming open and you're not able to get your user over there, you can always switch over to it. So that's always something to keep in mind. Now, switch sticking, this isn't a switch stick guide, but I will recommend if you are going to switch stick, try to stay in these underneath zones here. Any kind of deep blue like this deep half, and this deep half, and this middle third right here. I wouldn't necessarily try to get too into switch sticking to those guys until you really learn how to switch stick, just because if you mess up the switch stick on one of these deep zones, you're very vulnerable to giving up a one-play touchdown. So switch stick, it is a feature that you need to keep in mind. You need to practice. This isn't going to be a switch stick guide. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on it. But if you want to take your defense to the next level, learn how to switch stick. Okay, let's call it cover 2 drop again out of the cover 0 shell. And what happens if, say, you're getting hit with a corner route? I feel like we've all been hit with corner routes before. They can be really annoying to stop. Let's call the play here and watch this. That corner route's just wide open, right? Now, if that's happening to you throughout the course of a game, how do you stop corner routes? Well, this is where I talked about it is very important to know how to change your zone drops, as that's a very important feature in this game. If you're getting beat on deep corner routes, what you could do is you could run that cover 2 drop your flats to 25. Now, obviously with your flats dropping that far, the underneath flats are going to be very vulnerable, so you could always do something like this, where you could drop your curl flats maybe to 5, and if you're getting beat on a bunch of outbreaking routes, corner routes, flats, zigs, this is a good way to take some of this stuff away. So let's do this. Let's call smash corners again, that same play I just ran. And let's call that cover 2 drop out of the cover 0 shell. Now we're going to use our quick adjustments here. I'm going to put this guy in the middle third and then move him back a little bit. And this is the look, right? Now let's see how that cloud felt on the left side. If number 2, the wide receiver right there, runs a corner route, remember how I was wide open on that last play? Let's try to run that same play again and try to throw this corner out. Look at that. The cloud flat drops back and plays it. Now, obviously, if you were to do something like this, like I was talking about earlier, let's say I want to run an out route to letter Y, the Y receiver instead. And then we can put maybe this guy on a streak and get something like this. Now, obviously, when I drop my zones back to 20, obviously you give up that right there, right? And that's something sometimes you got to live with. And sometimes you are going to have to understand that you got to give up something to take away another thing. But what you can do is you could remember how I put that curl flat on 5. You can run what's called a Mabel, where you put 2 flats on one side. This guy could be in a cloud flat and this guy will be in a curl. And let's say, okay, I run this corner route. Oh, let's take it away. Now, any good player is going to be like, okay, his flats are dropping really far back. Let me go underneath here and throw this out route. And watch what happens. I'm going to put this guy on a curl flat. We're going to Mabel this left side. And let's see how this plays out. So I'm going to call this, boom. Look, I took away any possible outbreaking route on that left side. So now you got your opponent in a predicament. You just took away their corner route, and then they try to hit you underneath with a quick out route, and neither of them worked. See, we'll do it again. We'll go curl flat here, cloud flat, Mabel that side, put them in the middle third, and let's put Y on an out route, and we'll run something like this. Watch how this curl flat now plays this out route. Everything's just taken away. There's nothing your opponent can do. They can't throw corner routes or out routes to that side if they want to. Now, this is the predicament you want to put your opponent in. Now they know they can't throw anything to the outside. Now they got to change up their whole philosophy and now start attacking the middle of the field. Now they're uncomfortable, and this is where you get your opponent to make mistakes, right? This game is all about forcing 1 or 2 turnovers. If you can do that and get an extra 1 or 2 possessions in this game, you're going to put yourself in so much better positions to win a game by just doing those 2 things alone. Now, another thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is you always want to have a good blitz out of your defensive formation that you are sticking to. So right here, I kind of like this linebacker blitz 0. It's a cover 0. And obviously, if your opponent is sending 5 people out in coverage, you can take a gamble and maybe you can get this guy sacked before he can make a read. So let's call a PA read here. You could press Y and right bumper to show blitz. Now, typically, I also like to back off my cornerback so I don't get beat deep, especially with no help over the top. So this could be done by pressing Y, A for individual. And then, as you could see, the receiver icons pop up. So this basically just means that the guy in front of them, the DB in front of those receivers, you press, like, look at X, for example. Look at the cornerback at X. Okay, I'm going to press X. I want to change that cornerback, and I want him to back off. So I'm over here. I press up on the right stick to back off. And look at that. Now they're backed off, and I'll do the same thing to the right cornerback. So Y, A for individual adjustment. I want to get the cornerback on the B receiver to back off up on the right stick. So this is a good look right here. Yes, you're very vulnerable to maybe getting beat underneath if your blitz doesn't get there, but that's just kind of the gamble you like to take. And if you watch this here, you send a little bit of pressure at them. Now, of course, it got picked up with the play action. If you want to learn how to not let that happen, here's another little tidbit for you. You can go up on the right or press the right bumper and then up on the right stick to guess pass. That way, this play action won't fake out my guys anymore. Look at that. You see how he didn't even worry about the running back in the play action? You could pass commit and you could stop any kind of play action fake from happening. So another thing I would recommend you do too is if you feel like you could play some pretty good coverage, let's say, for example, I'll drop my flats down to 10 again. You could come out in this cover 0 shell and call something like cover 4 drop, which is a really, really good coverage, right? You're dropping a bunch of people back in zones, and it's going to be very hard for your opponent to find a soft spot in these zones. Cover 4 drop's really good. If you don't want to run cover 4 drop, that's perfectly okay. But watch this. When I come out in a cover 0 shell, look at this. Again, it still looks like cover 0, right? You want to make everything look as similar as possible, okay? You want to always confuse your opponent and make them think, what is my defender or my defensive opponent in pre-snap, okay? That's what you want them to think. If they have to guess what you're in, then you're going to buy just enough hesitation to maybe make a play or two. So I'm still in a cover 0 shell here, but now I'm in cover 4, and then I could call something like hard flats here. And now this guy thinks that we're maybe in man coverage when really we're in a cover 4. I have 2 controllers right now, by the way. So let's say he thinks we're in cover 0. Opponent might think that, okay, I can run some man beating routes and really take advantage of this man coverage when little does he know we're in a cover 4 with hard flats. So he might try to throw something quick like out route to Y here, thinking that he's manned up. When in reality, we're going to be in a cover 4 drop. And we'll call the play here. He thinks Y is going to be open, which he kind of is in a way. But for the most part, like, that's not exactly like, a bad thing to give up 5 yards in this game. And that's one thing that you guys got to get in your minds is that it is okay to give up yards. There is no defense in this game where you're gonna completely shut down someone and force 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. A lot of times you're gonna allow people to move the ball down the field. Now it's once they get close to your red zone, once they get to the 20, that's where you really gotta lock in and play some good defense. And I'll show you a good red zone defense. Let's call this cover 2 drop again, out of a cover 0 shell. And then let's say we'll call a flanker dig here. Now we'll move the ball inside the 15 here. We'll put it like on the 15. So this is a very hard part of the field to score in because the field has shrunk, right? You can't really no longer attack deep anymore because obviously the back end zone's back there. So what's a good setup that I like to run in the red zone? Well, you could do something like this where you put maybe this guy in a QB spy if your opposing quarterback is very mobile, or you can leave him in a hook. It's up to you. Pinch your defensive line, slant inside, left on the D-pad, down on the right stick. And then this is a good setup that you can run. That way, they forces them to have to attack these back corners of the end zone, which a lot of people just aren't going to be good enough or do, or even attempt to do. So this is a good red zone defense, especially if they try to pass the ball. As you can see, it's just very hard to complete a pass here, which obviously we did there, but chances of that happening are slim to none, especially if you have a good user, and I'm using one-handed user there, so I'll call this play again. Like, it's just really good pass defense down here. So let's go ahead and recap some of the things that you've learned in this video. Again, this is just a part 1. I'll release a part 2 and go more in depth with this as we go along here. First things first, always set your depth chart. And then always find a formation that you want to be in, and then make your subs where you put safeties in at the linebacker position. From there, you want to use the shell coverage and always disguise your defense to make your opponent think and make them not know what you're going to be in pre-snap. From there, then you can kind of build your own scheme and run something to your liking based on how you want to play defense. Now, it's very important too, I also forgot to mention, always use our linebacker and use the switch stick ability, and you need to practice that because that's a very important feature if you want to separate yourself from being a good player to becoming a great player. I'm going to drop more videos on that stuff later on. This is kind of more of a basic level understanding of how to run a defense and what you need to start thinking about if your defense is struggling. If you can just do simple things like making your defense disguised and making your opponent think after the ball is snapped, that's where you're going to force your turnovers and force your mistakes. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, this is kind of more of an introductory level to defense, and I really hope you guys can still take away something from it, even if you've been playing this game for a while. Or if you just need a quick refresher on these things, these are all tips that I feel like you need to incorporate into your defense to at least give you a chance to make a couple stops. Now, I'm going to build on to this video later on, might be a couple of days from now when I get the second part up, where we'll go more in depth with how to make individual adjustments as well as how to switch stick and user. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. I'll see you in part number 2.